Hello, hello.
Oh my God, look at us with our little mic situation. Check 1 2 1 2.
Check 1 2 1 2.
1 2
Party
1
time.
2.
Party time.
How are you?
This one can be 36 questions to fall in love, and the next one can be 36 dance moves. And it can just be a series of intimate dance moves.
Yes.
To better get to know one another.
Yes. I am so excited to be chit-chatting with you. I mean, it's always exciting to be talking to you. I love talking to you.
I know, I love doing these live interviews. It's new to me, but it's been really fun. It's exciting. And I'm really excited for this new series. So for anybody listening in, we are going to be chatting. We're going to be pulling questions from the list that was kind of popularized by the New York Times, 36 questions it's like to fall in love, but it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic love. It's just this series that is backed by science and research that is shown to help people develop intimacy, get to know one another. And so they basically took total strangers, put them in a lab, and had them answer 3 sets of 12 questions. Which get kind of escalating deeper and deeper. And I loved that the conclusion of it was, quote, one key pattern associated with the development of a close relationship among peers is sustained, escalating, reciprocal, personal self-disclosure.
Interesting. That's wordy.
I know it is, but I love like the series that it's specifically sustained, goes for a long time, escalating, gets deeper and deeper, reciprocal, and
I mean, I love that because when I hear that, I think about like the conjunction of energy or the transferring of energy, right? Like when I hear the reciprocating part, and I just think about how we transfer energy when it comes to intimate relationships, whether that's romantic, professional, whatever. When we start deepening that level of intimacy, we start transferring different forms of energy in order to actually deepen that. So I love that description, but it's like, just like, let me take a minute.
I know, you got to kind of sit and write it out and be like, okay, bullet points, which one? Yeah, but it's interesting as you read through them, to kind of think of how many of your, I don't know, it's really interesting. How many of these questions, I think there are some friends with whom people might think, oh, well, we've already talked about most of these. Right. And then other people with whom you might have a really close relationship. But since your relationships can be based on so many different things, it might be a close relationship where you actually haven't talked about a lot of these things. And so it might be, I feel like that might be so with family members, for example. Right. You get really close and there's just so much that's assumed about how close you are and how much you know each other. But there's actually, that's based off of, your relationship 10, 15 years ago and how much has each person changed. But how often do you, go deep with them to really,
Right. Ooh, well, it's, it's a time and it's an interesting time in our lives when we can actually kind of go deep with friendships and relationships and explore the depth of those. I mean, it's been really interesting kind of like with this whole stay-at-home and quarantine situation where we've connected with people that have been friends of ours for maybe a very short period of time online. And we've had some really amazing conversations with them that we spent almost like 3 hours just hanging out in our own separate homes on video chat, talking about things that I haven't spoken to with some of my closest friends that I've known forever. And I think it's just really interesting because, one of the things I was like telling Jonathan, I said, one of the beauties about this current space right now that we're all experiencing is that we are all finally, for the most part, experiencing one thing as a nation or as a world, as a humanity together.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, wow, like we can actually see eye to eye and realize like, oh, if I'm coming to this conversation with quote unquote baggage or stress or whatever, there's a reason for the stress this time. And we all actually can empathize with it.
Right. I've been kind of not obsessed, but fascinated by the fact that obviously there are a lot of negative things and overall this is an extremely tough experience, but the fact that the entirety of humankind, regardless of where they are in the world, where they came from, what their life has been like, you know, we are all going through the same shared experience that's connecting all of us. That is pretty cool and pretty humanizing. It's just yeah, it's incredible when, you know, I think probably hopefully it won't happen again, because it's generally only these negative things, but it's just incredible that you could, you know, connect with somebody on whatever other side of the world and relate to them right now, talking about like your personal day-to-day direct experience. When else has that ever happened? So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool. For those of you guys who are jumping on really quickly, and those of you guys who are from my audience, would you like to introduce yourself really quick, Sasha, so that they just know who you are, what you do, and that kind of stuff before we get started?
So I'm Sasha. I'm the founder of BBXX, which is this lovely account that is hosting our lovely little Instagram Live interview. And BBXX is basically your go-to resource for intimacy and relationships. So we create digital media content focused around sexuality, intimacy, and communication, with the goal of helping you better understand your own identity, understanding the way that society and culture has shaped the way we think, and therefore the way we talk to one another, and therefore the way that we act in our relationships. And to be able to kind of start to rethink, rewire a lot of the negative stuff that we've subconsciously most of the time absorbed, and all of us have, and begin to kind of question the status quo and start to develop your own kind of newfound sense of identity through deeper knowledge and understanding of yourself. Because we believe that it's only through that better connection with yourself that you can then, as a result, form better and deeper connections with other people, which is kind of the overall goal of BBXX. Better relationships equals better life. And it is particularly pertinent in today's situation. And so it's kind of a time where we're trying to help people feel as connected as possible at a distance. But we believe that you can deepen connection even at a distance. And like we were just talking about, it's this fascinating time in the world where we all have something we can talk about and relate to and share. And, you know, whether it's meeting new people or reconnecting with old friends, you know, there's never been a better time to reach out, to check in on somebody, and to kind of reestablish or deepen that connection.
Thank you for the little lovely intro in case it gets saved for the both of us. I think we have a little bit of that.
And so what we'll be doing today, besides talking about anything and everything that comes up, is we're going to be doing pulling questions from the New York Times, 36 questions to fall in love. And I'll be asking Jo some questions to help you all watching get to know her better, and help me get to know her better, and help us all feel a bit more connected, whether it's through this interview and listening to the answers, or taking some of the questions that you liked and later today, you know, asking your roommate, partner, friend across the world, whoever it, you know, new friend, using these questions to deepen connections on your own in your everyday life.
Sweet. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. There's a bit of an echo on your side. Do you have headphones you could put in? Otherwise, we'll figure out how to edit it out. Okay, and I'll reread this quote from earlier. So for you guys listening, this is based on a research study they did, where they put two random people in, you know, in a room, and they gave them these sets of 36 questions. And their findings from the study is that it did help people form these really deep, intimate connections. And the key pattern that was associated with the ability to develop that close relationship was sustained, escalating, reciprocal personal self-disclosure. And so you guys all know that's kind of what it takes, otherwise known as vulnerability, basically. But that's what it takes to, you know, form a deep relationship with somebody. So keep that in mind. It requires self-disclosure, you opening up. It requires it to be reciprocal. So they open up, you open up. It's a back and forth. It's a going deeper. You know, the escalating part is the building on itself and the ability to go deeper. And the sustained is it's an ongoing process. You know, it's not just a one-time thing, whether it's a long conversation for a couple hours or over the span of months, you know, let alone friendships that go for years and decades. But like we were talking about earlier with family members, you know, it's not just because you had a deep relationship or maybe really did know what was happening in the other person's life, who they were 15 years ago.
Doesn't mean they're the same person now.
If it's not sustained, exactly. You might be wrongly assuming you still have that understanding of the other person when they've changed a lot. And so sometimes those assumptions kind of can be not more damaging, but you know, it's a huge misconception that becomes a barrier to being able to actually deepen the connection.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it creates a block. Like those assumptions that, you know, a relationship that you had, maybe it started 10 years ago, is supposed to be the same over the course of the next 15 years is creates this blockage within anybody that can actually open up a level of connection.
And ironically, my oldest friend in the whole world, Emily, just joined. We've known each other since we were She's writing hilarious comments. We've known each other since we were she was born 2 weeks after me. So nice. A really long time. And I'm sure she would be able to relate to exactly how, you know, things change over time, but it's about continuing to follow where the other person is and find new ways to connect and kind of have a constantly evolving picture of who they are as a dynamic, changing person, who you are, and therefore your friendship as it also continues to, you know, evolve and dynamically change. So, all right. Well, we will start with a few of the questions from set 1, and we'll kind of just wing it and see, you know, how long they go. I'm sure some of the answers will be short, some of them will be longer. So we'll just see how it goes. And for everybody joining, we are reading the questions, the 36 questions to fall in love, which was popularized by the New York Times and is based on scientific research. So I'm going to start with, it's from the lighter set, which surprised me, but it is take 4 minutes and tell your partner your life story in as much detail as possible.
Oh, all right. So 4 minutes here. My life story. My life story. I was born in New York, Queens, Astoria, Queens, actually. My parents moved here when my mom was 8 months pregnant, and she wanted to go through New York because she was trying to cross like the Ellis Island. Like that was her whole dream as an immigrant woman, that she wanted to pass through Ellis Island when she came to the U.S. And so I am the youngest daughter, youngest child out of my family. My brother and sister are 8 and 10 years older than me. They were born in the Philippines, so I'm first generation Filipino American. My parents moved out to California to escape the cold, basically, roughly when I was about 4 or 5, because they just couldn't deal with the winters. I mean, we're island folks, so I mean, being in the cold winter is just not something that we're born to do. And growing up, I mean, like as an immigrant child, I think, you know, like most immigrant kids, like we learned how to survive. You know, my parents came here with like nothing, and I grew up with very busy parents that were doing their best to provide us with what they could and the means that they had. My brother and sister didn't move into the U.S. until I was about 10 or 12 years old. So my first like real memories with them that were significant weren't until my like adolescent years. Oh, and that was a real big challenge for me because they felt like they were another set of parents, especially in that generational gap and that cultural gap. them being raised in the Philippines, me being raised here, we just butt heads a lot. So there was definitely a lot of fighting and arguing growing up, a lot of misunderstandings just from cultural and generational perspectives. And so my upbringing was in a lot of eyes really, really rough, I would say, to like a more Americanized or Westernized mindset or mentality or perspective. But, you know, my life was very much the common life of most immigrant kids that are growing up here, or children of immigrant parents who are growing up here. My brother and sister disciplined me a lot physically, unfortunately, but that also meant that, you know, we had to really learn how to work through our issues as a family in a much more, I guess, unique or unconventional way. Unfortunately, because of the abuse, there was a lot of, what's it called? There was a lot of, there was kind of like a lot of authorities involved, right? And so, you know, my brother, my sister, when I was 15, called the cops on me for starting a fight with my family. And it really was like not even a fight. It was like me just asserting and taking up my space as a teenage kid. But since their generational and cultural gaps are so different, they saw that as just me being disrespectful in their eyes and not the way that a traditional Filipino kid should be raised. And so that was a blessing in disguise, because that whole situation set our family on a road to getting mental and emotional help through therapy, which was really amazing. At least it was amazing for me. My parents were still very much so the traditional Catholic Filipino parents who didn't believe in mental health or emotional therapy. They were very much so in the mindset of like, let's pray away any kind of emotions. And so that's kind of how they were. And I think that pretty much set the tone of me like being the rebel or the fighter in my own life, of just trying to really navigate my life in the best way possible for me. Because I knew that what they were trying to raise me with was just not, it just wasn't the way in which it didn't feel authentic to me, because it wasn't in alignment with who I am and who I was. And also in my culture of America or my Western culture. And so that pretty much like set the foot of who I became as I got older. And then I met my now partner for the last 18 years. 18 years ago, we moved in, had our first daughter at, well, she's going to be 16 in May, actually. So had our first daughter at 16. And since then, we pretty much were single-handedly trying to raise kids in our 20s, while still trying to create a career in life for us, which was really, really difficult and really challenging. And one of the things that I knew right off the bat when he and I decided to have a family was that I wanted to raise my kids with the emotional support that I didn't get when I was growing up. Because I knew how important it was to connect on that emotional level. Because as a child, that's pretty much all I was screaming for, was emotional connection and emotional support. And it's not that my parents didn't want to give it to me. It's just that they didn't know how to. They weren't raised in a kind of cultural generation that was taught the value and importance of someone's emotional well-being. Mm-hmm. And so we've been raising our two daughters in that sense. And then career-wise, I've been everything from being a hairdresser for 10 years to working in tech for 6. And now I'm a women's life coach for the last 2 years, trying to develop an online business and online program, as well as a social media influencer. So I've really kind of gone through all these different stages of my life career-wise to lead me to where I am today. That was Perfect. A little bit longer than 4 minutes, but hopefully that's my life story.
That's okay. That's okay. I didn't want to stop you. No, I think I love the idea of being the rebel in your own life, which you briefly mentioned. And, you know, I think all of us, whether we realize it or not, and if people don't realize this, I think it's important to, you know, are trying to create the things we didn't have growing up, you know, be it emotional support, be it connection, be it, a safe space, physically, emotionally. And so I think that it's important for us to recognize, what we didn't have and empower ourselves to seek that out rather than kind of repeating those patterns or going the opposite way and being kind of bitter about it, but making the conscious effort to create those things we didn't have and kind of have an empty space or need for, and to create it, whether it's for our family or for other people, it's where BBXX came from. So, okay, perfect. The next question, would you like to be famous? In what way? So I thought this one was interesting coming from somebody who has, built such a large following. I've never sat to think about what my definition of fame is. So I'm not sure kind of what your definition of fame would be, but I thought it might be kind of interesting to hear your opinion.
Yeah. When I think about fame, it's interesting. I don't, and of course, like, obviously, like, I have a pretty large following, but when I think of fame, I don't really think of it as popularity or volume of numbers, that I guess the way people look at it. The way that I view fame, or what you would be famous for, is, I guess the question I'd like to replace that with is, what is the legacy you want to leave behind? Because I think about this all the time in terms of what is the legacy, or what do I want to be known for? What do I want my kids to be kind of telling other people about when it comes to telling the story of their mom, like how their mom walked this earth?
Yeah.
And I guess, like, the thing that comes to mind for me is that, like, I want to be known for somebody that has created space for people to explore their own authenticity in a safe way that kind of explores the dark sides and the messy sides and the bright sides. I just want to be known as somebody that has given opportunity for people to be able to explore their fullest expression of themselves in whatever capacity that means.
And just to kind of, how would you define one's authentic self?
I mean, I think, like, I think this, like, pandemic is kind of a beautiful, I think it's beautiful in so many different ways. And one of the ways I think that it is kind of beautiful is that we are seeing a level of human expression from different people that we would have never really seen before. So, for example, like, what I mean by that is, you have somebody who appears to have always been like this go-getter, this, like, really type A, looks like they have all their shit together, and all of a sudden they're like, you guys, like, the shit is crazy, it's like falling apart, and you kind of see them in their own humanity. So that's what I think I mean in terms of authenticity. Like, to me, being authentic means living in your fullest expression of your own humanity, or your own human expression, which is a wide range of human expression, right? Like, where we can come to full acceptance of who we are in terms of the way we express ourselves. That to me is authenticity.
This concept just popped into my head of kind of the default self, and that this whole, stopping the world, and especially, for some people who aren't able to work anymore, or with everything being different, the kind of these other sides of them come out, these different versions. Some of them are kind of more fun, creative, or other people more stressed. Or other people just a bit lost and desperately trying to fill their time with whatever they can come up with. But that kind of, when you take away all the noise, all the hustle and bustle and busy work and busy talk and FOMO activities, what's the default? What do you do when all the rest of that stuff that takes up a huge amount of your bandwidth, time and energy wise normally, what's your default self that comes out in that new kind of environment? I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. If you were able to live to the age of 90 and retain either the mind or body of a 30-year-old for the last 60 years of your life, which would you want?
I think the body, and the reason being is because I would love to be able to capture all my life experiences in memory all the way through to 90. You know, like I want to have the mind of somebody who's gone through those experiences. And then, but 90, I'm hoping that I could be able to like share those experiences still. But I would want that. I'd want to retain the 30-year-old body just so that I can keep my mind evolving all the way through those years, because there's just so much more wisdom to gain.
Like keep adventuring out, keep traveling, keep doing things to be able to learn more in those, especially last years when you've kind of have the most wisdom.
Yeah,
to be able to have the physical body to keep up with exploring new wisdom.
Yeah, that's what I think. I'd look at it that way, because it's just one of those things where I just think like, God, I would not want to be 90 years old and have the mind of a 30-year-old. Like what kind of, like, I mean, I think about the chaos that I currently live in my 36-year-old self right now. And I'm trying to set myself up.
You want to channel the don't give any fucks mentality that comes with being 90.
With being around like 70 years old, and you're like, you know what? I don't give a fuck. I already lived all those years.
Totally. You know who you are. Mm-hmm. You're not wasting less fucks left to give.
Yeah.
If you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be?
Oh, man. I think the one thing that I would honestly change was the fact that my brother and sister lived in the Philippines in my younger years. Because I would have wanted to create some of the memories that I see our daughters have at that age right now. And I don't have a bond with them. We respect each other. We love each other, but they're not in my intimate circle. And that saddens me to a certain degree, but it also is one of those things where, as you mentioned, the sustainability part, like they came into my life when they were 20 something, and I'm still like 10 years old. They're already out the door in terms of family and wanting to develop a relationship with their sister, regardless of the fact that we're family. It's like, they're ready to like be an adult in this new country. Yeah.
So, and for better or for worse, you can't replicate that relationship that develops living with someone, whether it's your family or, you know, the relationship you can develop with a roommate versus if they were a friend that lived, you know, 15 minutes away, let alone an hour.
Right. Yeah. So just that. I think I would have loved to like just experience what my brother and sister would have been like as kids, you know, it would have been fun.
What do you value most in a friendship?
Truth.
And what does friendship mean to you?
Friendship has so many different levels to me. I think because of my line of work, I have the ability to get really deep with people on an intimate level because of just as what I do as a coach. And so that I think I always cherish. But in terms of my friendships, I value like pure transparency and no bullshit. Like I want them to come to me in their ugly and darkest and brightest moments too. Like I want to see all of them. I don't want this whole like, how are you doing today? And they're like, I'm doing great. But the reality is on the inside, they're like all jacked up. You know, like I want to know them for what their current state is at.
Yeah.
So to me, that's that. And then in terms of friendship, what do I define with that? Well, I think because I didn't have the closeness of family that you see so much on like media that's being like represented in media of just like this close, like knit family. My friendships, to me are like chosen family. Yeah. They are my sisters. They are my brothers. They are people that I lean on, in a way that, you know, if I couldn't lean on family, which I mean, in some ways I can for certain things, but in other ways I can't, I'm going to lean on my chosen family.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely different, you know, needs and different capacities for giving from different areas of life too. I love the comment you said about wanting your friends to come to you, you know, in their most difficult or ugliest times and their brightest or best times equally. And it's so interesting because immediately I thought, well, you know, when you are at your darkest, if you're just whether it's, passively completely depressed or, bawling, crying and screaming kind of in this lost, kind of crisis mode. I don't think I ever really call people at those, darkest times, or they're, maybe two people or partners or a certain, friend, best friend, which might evolve throughout life, but there are no more than ever, I'd say probably, 3 people that you could actually call at that time. But that's when people do want to hear from you. They want to know how terrible you are so they can help. And if you don't tell them, they won't know. But then there's also, those best times when something really great happens. We often then underplay how bad we're doing sometimes. And then we also sometimes underplay, accomplishments or exciting things, either because we didn't want to build up too much to it without knowing if it was going to work out or not. And then after the fact, you don't want to sound, too excited about it or, bragging, but really needing to own our own wins and share those. Because again, I gave a friend just the other day a whole speech about how he needed to share his what we're calling small wins, but they're actually big wins, because in the end, the small wins are the big ones. They're the building blocks. They're the ones that have more of a presence, and anyways, they're just more important to share almost than those bigger ones. But I think that's so interesting. So how can we make more of an effort to really own those low points and own those high points more, and expose ourselves in those times to our friends who want us to do so. Let's see, we have
a beautiful question here.
Oh, okay. Well, we could just throw this. This isn't one of the New York Times questions, but I love that somebody submitted one.
Yeah. So the question that Lean Mean Mommy Machine asks is, do you ever feel guilty?
Amazing handle.
Do you ever feel guilty unloading on those people, even if you would expect a friend to feel comfortable doing that with you? I'll speak on my, because I have been working really, really hard in the last maybe year, and it's been a practice of asking and receiving help. I'm the kind of person that just is not like asking and receiving help. And so for me, I think what I've had to do is lead by example, and to lead by example by unloading on my friends, and know that we have created a friendship that has enough safety and a container that I can unload in that capacity. And then in terms of the guilt, one of the things that have been useful for me is, instead of saying I'm sorry for like dumping on you, I actually say thank you so much for listening to me. You have no idea how much that means to me. So rather than like placing this notion that it is that's something that like you should feel bad for, I'm just like, I'm grateful that you have the ability and capacity to listen to me. And so that has been really, really, really useful to me. So I try really hard to not apologize for my human expression. I tell people, never apologize for crying. Never apologize for expressing how you feel. I say that to our kids all the time too. And that's really important, because, I people who come into my circle, I don't want them to feel guilty about the feelings that they're currently feeling in that moment, because I want them to own it. And if I'm the one who's saying I need to own my feelings, I also need to own my feelings too. And so rather than feeling guilt, I express gratitude, because the reality is you don't feel guilty for sharing all your shit to them or unloading. You wanted to do it. That's what friends are for. You needed them in that moment, and it's not a feeling of guilt for needing somebody. And so, I think bringing back what I like to refer to as like the emotional innocence in adults is what we need to kind of come back to. And emotional innocence, how I guess you can like envision that in your mind is like, if you're talking to a 5-year-old kid or a kid who's like 4 years old, you're not going to tell them to not feel a certain way. Or if they're hungry, you're not going to deny the feeling of their hunger or the feeling of their sadness. They're sad. They don't have any other complexities to that feeling. So going back and just kind of instilling that same kind of emotional, childlike sense and innocence into adults is really important too.
Yeah, I like that kind of childlike emotional innocence. And the quote you said, never apologize for human expression. I think that's incredible. And like we said, if it's the highs or the lows, maybe it's crying, maybe it's uncontrolled, ecstatic excitement. You know, youthful enthusiasm is one of my favorite qualities in any human ever. And I think we lose that a lot as adults. So I would just love for somebody to call me up, a friend bursting with uncontrollable excitement about something that happened, a small win, a big win, anything. I think we kind of need to tap back into that humanness and unfiltered youthful emotions.
Yeah.
We had and the other thing, going off of what Lean Mean Mommy Machine's question, is one of my sisters calls me a lot to unload. And I think as partners, as friends, one of our biggest mistakes is always offering, we want to fix it. We want to try and offer solutions. We want to do whatever. And every time, I think I'm getting a lot better at it. She goes, I don't want your, I'm just here for you to, you just need to be here to listen. I don't want you to give me advice. She gets really upset with me, but that's our instinct, is to fix it. But I think making that clear in the beginning to the other person, it still is an emotional, weight to let somebody unload onto. But when they know their job isn't to fix it, and actually you would prefer if they do nothing to try and fix it, just all you have to do is sit there and listen. And then, we can move on. We can talk about something else, but you have zero responsibility of figuring this out. That, I think, can also help the dynamic and I think kind of simplify it a bit, and maybe take some of the pressure off that might otherwise come with that.
Right. It's like that feeling of guilt, right? Like, I think the guilt sometimes is created when we feel like someone else has to take responsibility for our shit.
Right. Or when we feel like we can't fix somebody else's shit.
Right. And the reality is, like, we're not designed to fix other person's crap. We're designed to fix our own shit. Other people can support that, but it's not their job to fix our shit.
Or to ask, questions, help them explore it.
Yeah, for sure.
But neither is there generally one solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was another question which we can throw in there.
Yeah.
Or save.
There was a question that had popped up, right? In the little Q&A box.
Yes.
Awesome.
It was, do you believe in saving sex for marriage? Why or why not?
Well, I mean, I don't, so here's what I tell my daughters. And, I had sex with my husband prior to marriage, and I had sex with a couple other partners prior to my husband. And our daughter was born, I got pregnant before I got married. So I don't have an opinion on that, whether one is right or the other. Like, to me, it's a personal choice of whether somebody wants to, choose to save sex for after marriage. Also, I also think it's also really important to kind of think about, what is your definition of sex? Because, for some people, sex might mean other people, sex might mean finger play. It might anal.
We froze, but I'm back. Am I back? We are. Hello. We're back in action. And we're answering the questions from the New York Times 36 questions to fall in love, but we're also answering some of the questions that are popping up from you guys, our lovely, lovely users here. So you were answering the question about, I love that idea of kind of, what is your definition of sex? I'm not sure many of us have thought about that. So I think that's interesting for everybody tuning in. I challenge you to kind of, either write it down, share it with a friend, or a partner, really, really interesting. And then we go back to like Peggy Ornstein's proposal that, what if losing your virginity was actually the first time you had an orgasm, for example. There are
Right.
all these really different ways to define it. And so here we have from Lean Mean Mommy Machine. She said, I got pregnant while planning my wedding, LOL. Whatever you feel you are ready for mentally, just make sure you're mentally ready. And I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah. I was having a conversation actually with my 16-year-old daughter. She called me one day and she was like, so Mom, my friends and I have been talking about sex. I was like, great. Like load it on me. Like, I am really excited to hear this from you. And I'm also like really honored as a mom that my 16-year-old daughter is like open to sharing this conversation with me, which means that I've done my job of creating a really emotional safe space for that, which I'm like, fuck yeah, you know? But anyways, I was telling her my thoughts on, you know, sex before marriage and all that stuff from a parental point of view. And I said, look, babe, like, to me, sex isn't required for love and love is not required for sex. Some people are going to want to have sex before love exists in that combination because they want to just try it and they want to see how it feels like. We can't pass any judgments just because our perspective or our view on things is different on that. However, people want to go about their sexual choices or their sexuality or their sexual freedom or their sexual exploration should be based on what a person's personal choices are, because it's tied into their identity as a person. And if we place any kind of shame into that or any kind of opinions that might sway them one way or the other, we might actually destroy or just dent someone's identity a little bit, which is going to cause them to kind of rethink who they are based on somebody else's culture or belief systems. So, you know, I think like to answer that question, it is a little bit more complex because I don't believe there's a right answer for that. I don't believe that sex is required to be saved for after marriage or vice versa. It's all a personal choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you for the questions, everyone. Feel free to submit more. We'll eventually get, I think there's an hour-long time limit, so we can always log back on to finish the Q&A if there are more left over. Otherwise, we'll plan a 2.0 session for.
Yes. Yeah, well, we should plan
pretty open schedule, so. Okay, what is the greatest accomplishment? So now we left off with that kind of friendship question. We're in set 2 of these 3 sets. What is the greatest accomplishment of your life?
I mean, I honestly think right now, the greatest accomplishment of my life was probably having that conversation with my daughter. I think that to me, also, so that's one of them. But the other little accomplishment that what I thought was really hilarious was, I mean, obviously we're all in this like stay-at-home situation, right? So we're not only work from home, we're school from home. Everybody is home in our house. And our 15-year-old, nearly 16-year-old daughter, her name is Iris. She wanted to go play video games in the living room. And that living room wall is the same wall of our bedroom. And we told our kids, like, hey, you know, mom and dad need an evening to just be without any of your voices. Like, we're going to be in our room starting 8 p.m. Like, don't come in here unless it's an emergency. You guys are already fed. Everything is done, right? So our daughter comes in and she's like, can I play video games? And we're like, sure, but, you know, till what time, right? And she was like, well, what do you mean? And they go, well, what time? Because, you know, me and your dad here, we're trying to hang out and connect, right? And she goes,
trying to get intimate.
She goes, okay, you guys can have sex after 10:30. All right. Like, I want to play video games until 10:30.
I mean, the video games are probably pretty loud.
I mean,
probably
yes,
just a barrier between.
But it's also one of those things where as a child, you just don't want to be part of that, right? Like, you don't want to be part of that. So I think the fact that in our household, there's this mutual and beautiful understanding of relationships. And that there's a dynamic of my relationship with their dad that has all different parts of it. Like, they don't just see us as parents. They also see us as a couple and as a unit, as partners, as sexual partners, as like romantic partners. And they know the importance for us to be able to nourish all those parts of our dynamic so that we can be the best parents to them as possible.
Yeah.
So I think to me that has been some of my greatest accomplishments, is just being able to raise a family where everyone is able to talk about their needs and their emotions so openly so that we know how to support each other. That is like solid to me. So it's been really great.
And I think a lot of people can relate. And for example, here in the comments, I don't know if it's Joey or I'm going to go with Joie. Just
her name is Joanne, actually. She was one of my clients.
Oh, perfect. We have a comment here that says, presumably one of this person's greatest accomplishments was coming out on the other side of our son's mental health odyssey, both as parents and husband and wife. And so I think probably a lot of, parents can relate to feeling, some of the deepest sense of fulfillment in parts of their lives, moments, experiences, odysseys tied to their children and their children's growth, understanding, safety and all of that. And so shout out to that.
Yeah. And then Mean Mommy Machine says, what is a good age as a parent to talk to your child about sex? Is the age different for boys and girls, you think? Actually, I was asked this the other day through DM. And I think and we've talked about this before, Sasha, I think sex education should be given to kids as early as possible, but age appropriate. And what I mean by that is if your child is, let's say, under the age of, give or take 8 or 9, and depending on their own maturity and their own exposure to relationships and people and what they've seen, I think one of the easiest is teaching body autonomy and body anatomy and what are all these different body parts and what do they actually mean, and the differences between body parts from boys and girls, and labeling them in the proper scientific name. And the reason why I think it's important to label them in the proper scientific name is, should an unfortunate event happen where, did we freeze again?
Yeah, I think you're back. The audio got hijacked.
Oh, interesting.
Now you're back.
Am I back? Am I back? Okay.
Yeah, you're a bit blurry on my end, but I don't know if it's my end or everybody's, but at least now I can hear you.
I wonder if just everybody is if everybody's just jumping on IG Live these days, because it's just it's the way people are connecting,
Hopefully. Let's continue to connect here, everybody. Yeah. So yeah, you were talking about the importance of labeling those body parts, especially given, if there were to be some sort of unfortunate event. And this is something too, for all of you guys listening. If you tune into, we did a great podcast interview with, let's see, I'm going to find out what episodes they were. It's called the Birds and the Bees. And so we did an interview all about kind of when to, talk with kids and in what way and how soon you can start. And the reality is it can start as early as possible, because the most important things hello from Egypt. Amazing. Hello and welcome. Some of the most important, the base of all good relationships, of safe sex, of good sex is, this trust, respect, vulnerability. These are huge themes. Power. These are huge themes that have nothing to do with sex and have everything to do with sex. Right. There's that famous quote that everything that's about power is about sex, and everything that's about sex actually has nothing to do with sex and everything to do with everything else. Right. And so, I would highly recommend, if those tuning in are interested in learning more, it's episodes 11 and 12 on the BBXX podcast. So it's BBXX Let's Get Intimate. And it's talking with Logan. What's her last name? Logan. Anyways, she's amazing. There's also a video on our IGTV of her doing a Q&A. So check it out. Episodes 11 and 12, all about that. Okay, so as we get back to these questions and get ready to wrap up, what is your most treasured memory?
My most treasured memory. There's so many. But my ultimate most treasured memory. That's a hard one. I think that's a hard one for me because I treasure so many of them.
There's another one. It's what's your most terrible memory? But I wouldn't want to go into what I feel like that one's a bit of a weird question, very dark.
And that's also hard for me because I always have a way of looking at terrible things.
Right. But I was going to ask, what's maybe a hard or difficult memory or experience that has become important that you think has shaped you, that you've kind of gone back to?
Yeah. So the one that actually comes to mind, even in the question that you'd asked, like what's the most cherished memory, was the one where me and John, my partner of 18 years, finally had a sit down conversation. And it was brutally honest. This was almost like 2 years ago, where he asked me, "Are you still in love with me?" And I said, "I am falling in and out of love with you." And that was like the hardest truth I had to acknowledge to my partner, to just say, "You want the truth? I'm falling in and out of love with you." It's like and that happens, I think, all the time in relationships. But when I said this to him, I was like, I'm halfway out the door of this feeling of like out of love. And for me, I think like I want to say that I view love so differently. Like, I don't view love as just a romantic aspect. So when I think of love and when I express it, and he knows this, so when I expressed like I'm falling in and out of love with you, he knew that it was like, holy shit, she's scraping the bottom of the barrel if she's falling out of love with me. And that to me was one of the most cherished memories, and also like eye-opening memories for both of us, because we had to really then sit down and go, what is it that we both are putting into this relationship that is causing this much disconnection? And that's when the work really happened. And I think like oftentimes couples think that they have to do the work together and that's it. And that's part of the equation. But what they don't realize is that they have to do the work on themselves individually and together simultaneously. And that's when things for us really started to progress in this way that I think, and I want to say that people have witnessed us over the last like year and a half, 2 years. And they're just like, oh my God, your guys' relationship is so amazing. And I'm like, you have no idea the amount of work that we had to do on ourselves individually and together simultaneously in the same lanes as we're working towards something.
Yeah, because that's what builds the foundation of being together. And so one of our other IG lives we did was with my friend Tyla, and she was talking about how before deciding to get married, even though she'd been with the same person happily for, 10 plus years, was she didn't want to commit to this title of we, and risk kind of losing a part of her identity before she felt like she had it a bit more solid. And so it's about really having a stronger concept of I, before combining those identities, but then continuing to develop that I throughout.
Yeah. Super important.
Well, I think we're about to run out of time. And so we have a few more left that I think we can save for 2.0.
Sweet.
And maybe do another little Q&A with people the next time around.
Yeah, that'd be so much fun.
Yes! And the dance party. The next time we'll do like thematic.
A little dance. Yes, a little dancing.
Do like put on songs and explain the role they played in your life, or with a question when it's like, song. It's so interesting because you can play a song too and you remember, what year, what drama was happening, what your wins were, what your struggles.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Oh my God.
So thank you so much.
You're so welcome
for joining us, Jo, and thank you to everybody who tuned in. And we look forward to continuing this conversation in the coming days.
Yeah. Thanks, Sasha. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you guys so much for asking those questions.